Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a while coming. The Mechanic. The secret world of the F1 pit lane. However, if you are at least half sentient, as I would like to think, because you're watching such a cool YouTube channel, most of the stuff spoken about in this book, it ain't that secret. So, I'm going to go over a brief overview of it, because in all fairness, it's not the worst. It wasn't The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. So, mate, I'm telling you, that book completely sucked. That book was horrible.
Is that okay, Tony? Did I sit?
Alright? It was filled with storylines that just made you want to go to sleep. Actually, you used that book as a proven way of making people sleep. They had insomnia, get them to read a couple pages of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and mate, they are asleep in seconds. Trust me. However, this, The Mechanic, I have quite liked. Even though it's not really the secret life of the pit lane as it says, some of the things it discusses in it are pretty cool. So, I'm going to get into that now. So, this book was made by a fella called, written by a fella called Mark Elvis Priestley. He basically, in the book, he talks about his experiences within the McLaren garage. He started in, I think it was 2000, it might be 1999 or 2000, do not bite my head off on it because I'm not entirely sure. And he leaves in, I think, 2008 when Lewis wins the World Championship. That is a very, very brief overview of it because in all fact I could sit here for hours, but that's not what you're here for. One, you're here for my pretty little face. We're also here for a pretty quick book review. And if you're interested in F1, I would recommend you read it because this book, it's been interesting, but it's also been a nice read. It even had a foreword from David Coulthard, which was cool. But yeah, if I had to summarise the events within the book, I'm just starting with an overview here. It starts with how he grew to like or want to be in F1, and then how he got into F1 with him being recruited into McLaren, and then different stories within McLaren. So, for example, the Spygate saga. It briefly goes over the Renault Crashgate thing, like chapter 18 or something like that. But it didn't dedicate a whole chapter because it's Renault. Like, who cares about Renault? But I'm joking. But overall, it covers some pretty solid topics, especially if you're interested in Formula One. It's got a lot of stuff in there to read. Now, I'm going to start with the positives, which this book has a lot of. Unlike a certain book I was on about earlier, which I do not like. Now, this book, what I think does very well is talks about, I know it's daft, but I've got to credit it when credit's due. The way he talks about his experiences are very good. He documents them very well. And the wording with it, it's like you're reading a proper book. It's, well, I'd hope so. I paid like £10 for this. And it's good. He speaks about his career within the garage and how... I'm trying to think of the correct word for it. Don't mind me. I'm a bit slow when it comes to the language I was born and taught with. But he basically covers everyone's attitude in the garage at that time, the pressures on them. A lot of interesting topics if you're interested in getting into Formula 1 as like, I don't know, pit lane mechanic, or if you want to be a F1 driver, look at that one. But it's interesting of more a comparison of what F1 was in the past, because for some of the... I'm not going to spoil it, because in all fairness, I actually quite like this, and if you want to read it, go ahead. I've got a couple more F1 books, but if you want to read it, go ahead, because it shows you what a lot of times were back in F1 in that time. But it's a completely different world to what it is compared to now, how it's a lot more, I want to say regulated, but that makes it sound boring. It's a lot more optimised. We'll go with that. Now, I feel like I could give it more credit, but I might do that later, but I'm going to get onto the negatives first. So the negatives, if I'm honest with this book, are very slim. It is quite a solid book. He's a mechanic. It's as simple as that. If you expect him to go flying rocket ships or something, I mean, you're getting close to the Formula One, but mate, you should be looking at space books. My main flaw with this book is I wish he spoke more about his experiences and went into more details on them. Now, I know I said earlier he describes them very well, which he does, but for the first 10 chapters, all this guy can think about is Ron Dennis. He would wake up in the morning, Ron Dennis. He'd be making love to his wife, Ron Dennis. He would be thinking of the future man he wanted to become. And an image of Ron Dennis would be in his head. It was as simple as that. I'm not trying to mock the guy. It's very clear he has a lot of respect for him because, obviously, Ron Dennis, that guy was pretty cool. But if I had one complaint about the book, I just wish he didn't focus too much on Ron Dennis and what of a character he was. Because people know about Ron Dennis. You know, old McLaren, sort of really is to it. He's a pretty interesting guy. But if people wanted to go read a book about Ron Dennis, they'd go get a book called My Life as Ron Dennis. But don't get me wrong, he had to talk about it, and he's in McLaren, well, or was in McLaren, so it only makes sense for him to talk about it. It's just my only issue with it is that where he could have spent time speaking about himself and a lot of really cool experiences at some Grand Prix or some incidents at some parties, which he does talk about in one of them, is just instead he decides to focus more on Ron was like this, and dedicated a lot of the book to that. And it's not like the book's particularly big. Look at it. I think my Todger might actually be thicker than this, which is rare, very rare. And basically, I think it lets it down a bit. But Mark Elvis Priestley, I always think, Elvis Presley, I think of a very different fellow. But if you're watching this by some means, Mark, don't get me wrong, you published a great book. And I loved it, honestly. I just had to list my flaws with it. But apart from that, I thought it was a pretty solid book. Now, if you would like to read it, I would go for it, because you'd have to be into F1 to really think about reading it, otherwise you must be either very bored or unemployed. Probably both. If I had to rate this, I think my judgments in the past have been really bad, but I'm still quite firm on the one I gave on Away in Paris and The Invisible Life of Eddie LaRue. If I had to rank this, honestly, I'd give it a 7. Actually, no. I want to change the way the ranking works here. I don't want to do out of 10 because that makes it too hard. I'm now going to do out of 5. I think this book was a 3, maybe 3.5, 3.55. It was good. I liked it. Don't get me wrong. It could have been better, but I don't know if maybe Mark has published another book after this. If he has, then honestly I might read it, because if he goes into more details of the stories he got from within his time in McLaren, more specifically his stories, not the time Ron Dennis took a shit in the open or forgot to flush the toilet, I would be very happy to read him, because the way he writes and the way he documents his thoughts or what he did think is very interesting read. Thank you for watching. This has been Bad Journalism